Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Today is June the 26th, 2025. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Many people in boxing are upset that Turki Al-Sheikh has gone public talking about how he would like some of the fights that he's promoting to end, right? He wants Hamza Shiraz. He's hoping Hamza Shiraz beats Edgar Berlanga. He's told you so. Right? He's hoping Shakur Stevenson beats William Zepeda. He's told you so. People don't like the optics. Right? If a promoter is telling you who he wants to win a fight, then how do you know the other fighter is going to have a fair chance? Right? Are you watching something with a preordained outcome, or are you watching an athletic contest? Folks, let me just say, I love what Turkey's doing here. Let's keep it real, right? You know who most of these promoters want to win. You know which fighters have contracts with which promotional outfits. Right, folks? You know that already. Let me say, too, some of these shows, they're put on by one side. Right? Well, what I need for people to know is that that's the history of boxing. People here understand that my favorite boxer ever, might be my favorite athlete ever, is Jack Johnson. Right, folks? Back in the day, everyone understood that promoters were looking for, opponents to knock off Jack Johnson, right? The great white hopes of the world. People understand that Tex Rickard wanted his guy, Jack Dempsey, to win fights. Folks, I'd rather hear the truth than something else. Right? I don't want everyone pretending that they're okay with either fighter winning. Right? I want to know how uphill it is for a fighter. Right? So let me make a few other points too. And these other points are actually the main part of the presentation here today. Number one, the fighters themselves don't know how good they are. Right, folks? These fighters come up, they have sycophants around them. They have people looking for jobs, people looking for paydays, people who, see the fighter and think, gee, this guy might be able to win certain types of fights. They're telling the fighter certain things. The fighter's all in because the fighter, might be from an impoverished background. This is his big opportunity. This is his big moment in life, right? But in the abstract, these fighters have no idea whether they're club fighters, whether they're great fighters, whether they can deal with the best of the best. They don't know. Boxing really doesn't have a league. Let me say this too. Some fighters come up through the amateurs. They actually get to travel. They get to see other guys. They get to fight in other countries. They get to fight the best of certain countries. But that's in an amateur boxing setting. Right? Far fewer rounds. You're wearing headgear. You can't go rough and tumble. If you're fight style. It's the kind of fight style where you win wars of attrition. How are you going to do that in 3-round fights? Right? Let's face it, some of the best fighters we've seen did not win Olympic gold medals, even though they went to the Olympics. Right? Roy Jones, Floyd Mayweather come to mind. Right? Understand, too, other fighters, Daniel Dubois, decided not to go to the Olympics. He was lucky enough to meet up with Frank Warren, who said, hey, player, you've convinced me I don't need to see a medal to sign you to a contract. You sign with me, I'll have you in the gym, sparring with some of the best professionals, some of the fighters in my stable. Right? Are you going to get that going to the Olympics? Right? I'm offering you a spot on third base right now. Right? You go to the Olympics, you get some bad judging, as many have in the Olympic Games. Right? You lose some qualifying match. You don't make the medal rounds. The fans don't know who you are. You're listening to some amateur coach. I'm offering you access to pro coaches. Right? So understand, there's a lot of trust. There's also too much consensus in boxing. Right? How can you have a sport where longtime viewers believe that styles make fights? Right? That's what I believe. Styles make fights. You can be a great fighter, but somebody else might have the style to beat you. Let's remember, not only does Iran Barkley beat Thomas the Hitman Hearns twice, but the second fight goes the distance. And Barkley beats Hearns on the scorecards. Right? In other words, it's not a, oh, I got a lucky punch. Oh, I knocked you down here. Oh, it wasn't your night. No. It's, player, we've gone the distance here. And the judges, looking at our bodies of work, have given me the win. Right? For the record, Thomas Hearns is one of the best fighters I've ever seen in my life. Right? So just understand, the fighters don't know how good they are. The consensus will fail you in some fights based on styles. Right? I still believe Jimmy Young beat Ali in the 70s. Right? In fact, let's look at Ali. While I consider Ali in the 60s to have been the best heavyweight I've seen, in the 70s, I'd take his protege, his sparring partner, Larry Holmes, over him. In fact, a guy Ali beat using a one-fight strategy, using a rope-a-dope strategy, I believe is probably a person closer to the best of the 1970s than Ali was. Right? I believe if we wanted to find out the very best of the 1970s, the match would be Larry Holmes against George Foreman. Right? Let's talk about capital. Right? Here is Turki. He has a lot of money. He now has stepped to the front of the line in terms of promoting boxing matches. Right, folks? I got news for you. Capital doesn't know how good the fighters are. Right? Just because you're a fight fan and you have a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean you know or can control the outcome of fights. Right? Styles make fights. That's the greatness of boxing. We're looking at some matchups and you don't know how that plane's going to land until you actually see the guys in the ring. Then you notice some things that are shocking. Right? I mentioned that Ali-Jimmy Young fight. Here's Jimmy Young with negative energy against Ali. And Ali couldn't handle it. Ali's so desperate at one point, he's practically begging Jimmy Young to come fight him. Right? This is Mr. Back Foot. This is the guy who's on his back foot against Sonny Liston. right? We found out Ali needed to be pursued by Jimmy Young. Who would have guessed that before that fight, right? Let me say, too, that the sport's deeper than that. A lot of the sport is an illusion, right? Take the trainers. Folks, we've all seen that talented fighter who is struggling in their careers, right? Something is just not quite adding up, right? Same fighter. Then the fighter changes trainers. Big moment for boxing, right? Big moment for the 1990s. Lennox Lewis switches over to Emanuel Stewart, who was not his original trainer. Right? I would say Lennox Lewis was the best heavyweight of the 1990s. Right? That switch changes Lewis's game. Right? Now, if you think that's unusual, understand with the same trainer, the same thing happened with another great heavyweight champion. Right? Understand Vladimir Klitschko was struggling. Vladimir Klitschko gets decked by Corey Sanders. Right? In fact, Vladimir Klitschko lost to Ross Purity. Know your boxing history. So his career was in danger. This was, like Lewis, an Olympic gold medalist. Highly thought of. It looked like he wasn't going to deliver on the promise. So what happens? This is the value of a trainer. Right? The Vladimir Klitschko you see against Corey Sanders, his head in front of his feet. He's inviting a shootout. Right? Couldn't handle a shootout against a slick, hard-hitting southpaw who Corey Sanders was. Right? Let me ask you too. If your fighter has lost to Ross Purity, what are you doing putting him in with Corey Sanders? So, of course, he switches trainers. Emanuel Stewart shows up, and Stewart, in essence, says to him, how could you have this level of a jab and ignore it? Right, folks? Emanuel Stewart says something even deeper to him. Right? Player, here you are with the Olympic gold medal, and you have the wrong center of gravity. So Vladimir Klitschko goes from leaning over to leaning back behind a jab. Right, folks? That changes things, doesn't it? Suddenly, Vladimir Klitschko becomes the standard in the heavyweight division. Now, we can debate this. Boxing is made for debates. Right? Boxing is one of these sports you talk about at the pub, isn't it? Right? A guy could be at the pub, he could disagree with you. You know, in your heart, you know, hey, this guy might be right. You know, in your heart, you know, my point of view might lose to his point of view if these fighters ever get in the ring together. I would argue that Vitaly Klitschko was the best heavyweight in the Klitschko family, not Vladimir Klitschko. Right? But Vladimir, of course, had better looking highlights. Right? Vladimir, looked like a more muscular, better athlete. Right? Some of what Vitaly's doing, looping punches and stuff like that, a lot of people don't appreciate. Right? No one had to tell Vitaly, former kickboxer, the importance of leaning backward. Right? So here you have Turki. And my point to you is simply, in big fights, where the fighters are driven to be the best, where they understand the biggest pot of gold is for the champion fighting in championship defenses And all of these guys want to be champion, right? Turki Al Sheikh, understands the biggest money is in putting on credible fights. He's not trying to tilt the playing field, right? He's a fan of boxing, so he's just telling you, hey, I'm putting on the fight, but as a fan, I want to see Hamza Shiraz win. Now here's where it gets interesting. Let's talk about the guys he wants to win, right? And let's be blunt here. We can be blunt here, because I don't work for a network, right? I'm not looking for a network job. I'm not looking for a job with any one of these outfits. Understand, I have my own career, right? I'm just trying to help gamblers like myself. So let's talk about Hamza Shiraz. Now, this might shock some people. Here's where boxing really gets interesting, to me at least. Right? I saw the Hamza Shiraz Carlos Adames fight. Right? Now, let me say this. Boxing has many cultures. Many. I've rarely encountered a culture that's harder on its fighters than the British, right? And I say that knowing that I have a lot of British subscribers, right? Folks, understand, the British, and I'll give the British credit, insofar as they don't care if you're the heavyweight champion, right? If they feel that you are cutting corners, if they feel that, you're in the same room as PEDs, if they feel that, you're out using recreational drugs, that you're not respecting the crown, they're going to come down hard on you, as Tyson Fury knows firsthand. Right? They don't care if you're an up-and-coming contender. Right? If they feel that you have, taken PEDs, they're going to slam the door on you, and the suspension is going to have teeth in it. And they're going to make it clear, too. This isn't going to be the cover-up job you have in the United States, where, was Ryan Garcia vacationing for a year, or was he suspended for a year? Right? No, in the UK, they let everyone know. This guy failed a drug test. So Dillian Whyte has been suspended. When they thought Dillian Whyte may have failed another drug test, he was jammed up for months. Right? Well, understand, the British fans are tough. So, Hamza Shiraz fights a competitive fight against Carlos Adames. Let's call it competitive. Right? I thought he won the fight. I'll be blunt with you. I quite frankly believe, and some of you have taunted me in the comment section for this, and hey, that's a free speech zone. Have at it. Right? But I believe Shiraz is one of the most talented fighters in all of boxing. Right? So, just understand, British fans, the same group that's tough on Lawrence Okolie. By the way, Okolie has only lost once in his career. He has won more titles than he has professional defeats. British fans don't like him. Let's just say he's not a favorite of British fans. Well, understand, British fans, for whatever reason, aren't in love with Hamza Shiraz. Right? So, the Adames fight. Many British fans believe that Adames got robbed. Right? This is why England is ground zero for boxing. Because the fans are passionate. Right? It's like New York City. New York City will boo you. Then when you start delivering, they will love you. Right? So just understand, British fans believe Hamza Shiraz got a gift draw, not even a win. By the way, but this is how tough the country is. Not even a win. They're upset that their fighter got a draw against Carlos Adames. Okay, fair enough. Right? You know, as they say with New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. I think the same can apply to the UK. Right? The UK is hard on their own. That's the bottom line. I'm sure if a UK fighter encounters this video, some of them are going to be nodding their heads. Right? You want to see a tough press score, folks? Look at a UK press score. Right? You know, I read the Daily Mail from time to time. I'm surprised how tough they are on some of their athletes. But here's the wrinkle. While the UK is conflicted about Hamza Shiraz, I believe he's going to show you that he's one of the best. Turkey is talking about putting him in the ring with Canelo. Now understand, I believe Canelo beats Crawford. I have my doubts on whether Canelo can beat Hamza Shiraz, who just arrived at 168. Now let's talk about Shakur Stevenson. And let me say this. Think of the slickest negative energy, back foot, coordinated guys you know. Right? You'd be surprised, but Ali in the 60s, what was not just getting stoppages, he was calling rounds. So he's fighting. And keep in mind too, he becomes champion and he's fighting contenders. Right? So he fights Zora Fali. Understand, Fali had been a contender for years before the Ali match. Right? And look at the knockout in that fight, folks. Right? Ali was just too fast. The Cleveland Williams fight, and I'll agree, this is after Cleveland Williams got shot. I'm not saying the Cleveland Williams who Ali fought was the same Cleveland Williams who Sonny Liston fought, who broke Sonny Liston's rib, by the way. Right? But understand, Cleveland Williams doesn't make it to the second half of the fight. And that fight, I believe, is in Williams' backyard. Right? Ali is stopping guys. Guys aren't going the distance. Let's talk about a guy who Marvin Hagler called the Rabbit. Right? Ray Leonard. Folks, Ray Leonard stopped Thomas Hearns. In fact, understand, Ray Leonard had a knockout ratio for his career. A career that had a lot of big names on it. Right? Ray's career knockout ratio is over 60%. Right? Now, Shakur Stevenson's a young guy in his prime. His knockout ratio is below 50% right now. Now, I've heard that Shakur is a great guy. Right? You know, Shakur is friends with people like Terence Crawford. You get the feeling Shakur is a guy who, you know, is a boxing craftsman. Timothy Bradley used to flatly say Shakur Stevenson was going to take over boxing. And Bradley is tough. Right? Bradley is very tough. Bradley is the guy on Top Rank telecasts who will tell you that he believes Jermaine Ortiz beat Teofimo Lopez. Right? Bradley's tough. He's not the house expert. Right? This is a guy who'll disagree with the house. At a time when Loma and many others were at 135, he believed that Shakur Stevenson was the standard at 135. Right? So understand, there's a group out there that believes that Shakur Stevenson is the future of boxing. Turki is telling you that he hopes that Shakur beats William Zepeda. Who's talking about Zepeda? Right, folks? Now, for me personally, the Stevenson-Zepeda fight is going to be a moment of truth. Right? Because I saw Ali. I saw Ray Leonard. Right? Shakur Stevenson's a different type of fighter. Right? I saw the Edwin De Los Santos fight. Oh my goodness, folks. Let me make a few points. I was not impressed with Shakur Stevenson in that fight. That fight could have been scored differently. Maybe the powers that be disagree with me in boxing. Good for them. Right? As I said, boxing's the ultimate. Let's talk about it at the pub sport. Right? But let's just say Stevenson is too far away from De Los Santos. We criticize William Skull for the fight he fought against Canelo. If you're going to criticize William Skull, then I'm lost on why Shakur Stevenson isn't more scrutinized for fights like that De Los Santos fight. Now, I know Shakur is highly skilled. Truth be told, he's fun to watch. I'm a guy who likes great defense. Truth be told, Shakur Stevenson is one of the most accurate punchers in all of boxing. Right? You and I know that wouldn't matter against a George Foreman. You and I know there's another side to the fight game where, if a slugger feels that you can't hurt him and he's prepared to get you in the pocket and keep you there, or get you up against the ropes and slug it out with you, right? We'll call this the Foreman, the Marciano, the Fraser side of the sport, right? The Dempsey side of the sport, right? Well, folks, that's the side of the sport, that's the side of the street that William Zepeda is on. So I'm intrigued when Turki is talking about how he hopes Shakur Stevenson beats William Zepeda, an action fighter. Let's add another layer to it. What can Shakur Stevenson do against Zepeda that Tevin Farmer hasn't already tried? Right? And Farmer is much more in the pocket than Shakur Stevenson is. Right? So what it adds up to is two riveting fights, in my opinion. Hamza Shiraz against Edgar Berlanga. We know Edgar Berlanga is going to bring action. We know he's going to try to land some big shots. We understand he probably feels, as heavier guys do, that this guy is coming up to his division and can't take his punching power. Right? I'm sure that's what Canelo thinks about Crawford. Right? He's coming up to my weight class. If I get him in the pocket, what's he going to be hitting me with? Right? Is it going to be something that I can take? Because if I can take his shots, I'm confident that he can't take mine. That's likely the Berlanga point of view. Right? We also know, too, just looking at Berlanga fights, that he's not thinking about some of the things that Hamza Shiraz would think about. Right? You see him against Canelo and you're like, really? You think it's a good idea to have your back close to the ropes? To have Canelo between you and the middle of the ring? You think that's a wise choice? Have you been watching Canelo fights? Right? The Shakur Stevenson fight is interesting, because I guarantee you This is a guarantee that William Zepeda, who did get knocked down by Tevin Farmer, maybe that's the part of the tape that interests Stevenson, right? But I guarantee you that William Zepeda is going to come looking for Shakur Stevenson. That's a guarantee. Right now, the question is, which Stevenson is going to show up? Right? The reality with Ali, this is something to think about, is that Sonny Liston never goes the distance with Ali. Right? We think of Ali as this smooth, slick fighter. Right? The bottom line is Sonny Liston doesn't go the distance with Ali. A guy who gets rough and tumble with Ali, drops Ali, Henry Cooper, puncher, doesn't go the distance with Ali. Right? Let me say, too, the way not to fight Ray Leonard was to come after him. Right? Ray, like Floyd, by the way, banked on the idea that you would see him as a pretty boy. Right? Floyd's nickname for a while was Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather, before it was money. Right? The worst thing you could do was to go after Ray Leonard. Then you started to realize that Ray was a combination puncher. Then you started to realize that Ray had power with both hands. You want to see a brutal knockout where a guy is out cold before he hits the canvas? Look at Ray against, I think his name was Davy Green or some name like that. Right? Look at the ferocity of Ray's shots. Realize that Ray's loading up on shots. Ray's not trying to win that fight by decision. Ray is all about a stoppage. Right? So I myself am wondering what happens here. Because Zepeda is higher volume than Edwin De Los Santos. You jump backward on Zepeda, like Shakur Stevenson did, Edwin De Los Santos, and understand Zepeda has faster foot speed than De Los Santos. He's going to close the gap. He's going to make you look like you're running. Right now, Stevenson is a southpaw. He has an excellent left hand. Right? He's going to have to use it. He's going to have to fire back. Right? As you watch the fight, ask yourself the question, could anyone know with certainty who's going to win that fight? Could the promoter know? The answer is going to be no. Right? The fight might even turn out to be lopsided based on styles. So let's pay attention to what's happening. Me personally, I believe all of these promoters have agendas. Right? All of them. If Oscar De La Hoya was promoting this fight, he would want his fighter, William Zepeda, to win. Right? There are going to be other promoters who understand that Zepeda fights anybody. Right? We're not going to get multi-year excuses as to why, Zepeda hasn't fought Gervonta Davis. Right? So you have a lot of promoters who have no financial interest in Zepeda, but who have a financial interest in their fighter. Who might think to themselves, Zepeda's perfect for my guy. Zepeda would be willing to fight my guy. They'll be rooting for William Zepeda. Let me tell you, these compilation videos where they go around and they ask different fighters and different trainers, they ask them, hey, who do you think's going to win this fight? They don't put disclaimers on the bottom of these videos. This trainer might have an agenda. Right? This fighter might have an agenda. Right, folks? You can trust no one. someone says, yeah, I think this guy's going to win, you have to ask the question, wow, is this guy they're asking who's going to win this fight, is he affiliated with the other fighter? Right? Do they share the same manager? Do they share the same trainer? Are they from the same promotional outfit? Right? I mean, let's face it, this is like going to an NBA draft and asking a GM, whether they think some guy picked by a team, was a good pick. Look, that GM has his own agenda. Right? If the GM wants to trade for the guy, the GM's not going to say, hey, yeah, I think it's an outstanding pick. I think this guy's underrated. Right? So they don't ask GMs because they understand there's a conflict of interest. But in boxing, they'll ask a PBC guy about whether another PBC guy is going to win the fight. Right? So at the end of the day, understand, everyone has an agenda. Everybody's looking for something. Right? The fact that Turki has gone public saying, I hope these guys win the fight. Well, great. Understand whether or not he went public with that. Right? Understand, like many of us, he has a preference on who wins. Right? For me, my preference is whoever I bet on. Right? Hopefully Turki has talked with the judges, has let them know, look, whoever I want to win the fight, you need to judge the fight independently. Folks, I'll be blunt with you. I'm not sure if either of these fights goes the distance. The judges might not factor in the decision. Also, let's be real here. When a sport has had a history where, Tex Rickard and people like that were involved in past promotions, right? Isn't this the sport where we understand Frankie Carbo in an earlier generation and the mob had guys out there, if you believe Jake LaMotta, right, had guys out there throwing fights. Right, folks? In situations like that, I prefer transparency. Right? So to me, hearing Turki say, hey, here are the guys I want to win, just makes it more transparent. Right? The bias is out there. We all understand it. Right? As I myself have said in prior videos, judges privately know who the promoter wants to win the fight. You don't have to be Einstein for that. If William Zepeda is fighting on an Oscar De La Hoya card, and I'm judging the fight, and it's a close fight, I know Golden Boy wants a certain fighter, their fighter, to win the fight. The fighter they've promoted in the past. Right? No one has to tell me that. Right? And so let's have more transparency. What Turki has done is now, if the fights are close, let's say Berlanga does enough where at least 40% in the crowd feels that he's won the fight. Now, of course, the pundits are going to carefully scrutinize even more the judges' scorecards, because they'll know that the promoter before the fight said that he hoped Hamza Shiraz would win the fight. Right? So if Berlanga loses a close fight, there's going to be outcry. Right? Berlanga will have extra grounds, extra credibility with the public to demand a rematch. Right? Sooner or later, we're going to have fighters saying, hey, you heard the promoter. The promoter didn't want me winning. Right? Then, of course, you saw that fight. Who do you think won the fight? Right? The way boxing really works is, if at least 40% of the crowd thinks, hey, man, I think Berlanga got robbed, he'll be in line for bigger fights, whether it's against Hamza Shiraz or whether it's against, since Berlanga's having a problem making weight at 168, let's be blunt, You know, Benavidez, Bivol, Beterbiev, Callum Smith, you know, other guys at 175. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I hope you share yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.